Good evening, everyone. We're thrilled to welcome you to this evening's Third Thursday program. This month, it's Coloring and Cocktails, and we're celebrating mountain ranges of the Americas, specifically ties between the Appalachians and the Andes. I'd like to also say hello to the folks in the museum's Perspective Cafe who are joining us on the big screen. My name is Christy McMillan, and I'm the museum's Director of Learning and Engagement. I'll be your host for this evening's program. Please note that all participants' microphones are muted by default. We are recording this evening's program, so if you prefer not to appear in the recording, be sure to turn off your video. However, if you'd like to turn on your video at any time, you're welcome to do so. And I hope you will turn on your video at the end of the program to share your coloring page in progress with the group. While coloring is a pastime typically associated with children, research shows that it's a great stress reliever and calming activity for adults as well. First, coloring focuses our attention on something outside of ourselves and into the present moment. Second, coloring relaxes our bodies and brains by focusing our awareness on a simple activity. Finally, since the outcomes of coloring are low stakes and predictable, it frees us to relax and let go. In fact, the therapeutic benefits of coloring have been compared to listening to a person's favorite music, which makes the combination of coloring, music, and cocktails on tonight's program even more apt. I'd like to go over the flow of tonight's program so that you know what to expect. It'll be divided into two main parts. For the first half, we'll start with Miranda Escalante from the Montford Rooftop Bar, located in downtown Asheville, serving up small bites and seasonally driven craft cocktails. This evening, she's our guest bartender in the museum's own rooftop Perspective Cafe, and she'll be mixing up a cocktail for us and telling us a little bit about the origins of the agave plant. Then our school and family programs manager, Kelly Baisley, will interview Appalachia Now artist Byron Tenesaca, the creator of our artist design coloring sheets this evening. For the second half of the program, we invite you to sit back, relax, and work on your coloring pages while listening to experimental Andean music created especially for our program to complement Byron's presentation, performed by Natalia Maxie of Yuyaywan. All our presenters will stick around for Q&A at the end of the program, but we encourage you to put any questions that you have in the chat box throughout the evening. We're so glad to be able to connect with members, the Asheville community, and new followers through our Museum from Home initiative, including a robust array of regular virtual programs. It's been over a year since we started offering virtual programs, and for our staff and many virtual visitors, they've been a source of intellectual stimulation, delight, and respite during the global pandemic. We'll continue offering virtual programs for the foreseeable future, blend in-person and virtual offerings as we did this evening, and continue to grow our in-person offerings in accordance with federal, state, and local safety guidelines. All right, are you ready to get started? I'd like to turn it over now to our guest bartender, Miranda Escalante from the Montford Rooftop Bar. Tonight, Miranda is mixing up our featured drink in the museum's Perspective Cafe. Welcome, Miranda. Please tell us about the cocktail you'll be mixing up for us this evening.
Cool. Can you hear me?
Really well.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to clip this then because I like to talk with my hands. So,
okay.
So today I just wanted to talk briefly about Agave Spirits. They are just so much more than tequila and so much more than the Margarita. So if you could go to that next slide, please. Just a basic thing. What is agave? It's a genus that's been around for thousands of years, and it's actually part of the asparagus family. I know it looks like a cactus there, but it's not a cactus. There are 252 species, and this plant has evolved over thousands of years. So it actually thrives in rocky soil, mountainous regions, high elevation, with little to no water. The plant is comprised of those spiky leaves that you see. It's all guarding the heart of the plant. It's called the piña. And these plants can grow to be 10 feet long and have a long stalk that can be up to 20 feet. The flowers are all the way at the top, and they're really growing to protect the seeds because it only flowers once in its lifetime. The cool part about evolution with agave is that it performs the bulk of its photosynthesis at night. And the other important part is that at night, it opens up its pores so that it can drink water that it's collected either from rain or condensation. Next slide, please. So I tried to keep distillation of tequila quick and dirty. We're gonna go through the basic steps. It is so involved, and the history of tequila is just massive. We're not even gonna cover that. But first, we have to shout out to the humidor because they are the harvesters of agave, and it is an incredibly difficult job. So these plants can get to be 10 feet long. The piña, which is the heart, can be up to 100 pounds. This can only be done from a humidor and by their hands during incredibly hot temperatures. So they use what they call a koa, and it's a razor sharp thing, but they cut all the spiky parts of the agave plant down. This helps us get to the first step of distillation, which is where they roast the piña in a horno. It's an oven, and the best tequilas are roasted in brick ovens. You can do it in stainless steel, but that's like some more higher commercial distillation. Your big houses like Sauza, Jose Cuervo, but the small families still make them on those brick ovens. The piña is the sweet, sweet heart, can be up to 100 pounds. And the thing is that the agave plant has to be between 6 and 12 years old. So harvesting agave is incredibly long process. It's a hard process. So now that we've roasted it, we're gonna pull it off. We're gonna crush the roasted piñas. This has been traditionally done either by hand or with a mule, and it's on a big, huge stone called a tahona. So you add spring water. You're trying to extract as much sugar from the agave that you can. And then you pull off all that juice. This part can be done also with a machine, and we're talking about those big distillers when you're doing that. But you're gonna introduce yeast. You can do a proprietary blend or leave that juice out in the open where it's airborne and let natural yeast kind of do its thing. Then you're gonna pull all that juice off. So also the introducing yeast can take 3 to 5 days, can take 12 days if you do it naturally. Distillation, tried to just make it as simple as possible. So simply means you're gonna separate the liquid and make vapors and purify that raw alcohol down. Tequila is distilled twice. After that, you can bottle it. It's young. It will be blanco, just clear like this. You can age it for a couple months. That's reposado, which means resting. Or you can age it for up to 3 years. And that's gonna be your añejo. So next slide. There are 6 different kinds of agave spirits. I would be amiss if we just talked about tequila. I just wanted to let you see some of these names. And the 3 that I want to really point out are obviously tequila, which we'll be using to make the margarita in a moment, but also mezcal. So this is a smoky style made in Oaxaca. It can be made all over Mexico. And with tequila, you only can use the blue agave. With mezcal, you can use several different varieties of agave. And the cool thing about mezcal is that you roast it in the earth on volcanic stones, and it takes 7 days to several weeks. So as long as it takes to get that sugar content. Super fun. Maybe some of you bought mezcal for your margaritas at home. Also great if you really like smoky things. The other thing that I really wanted to talk about is that last one, pulque. So it was the first agave beverage to be made by the Aztecs, and it was used for celebrations and rituals. The picture here is actually someone drinking pulque. It's low alcohol. It's fermented from the sap, and you have murals from 200 AD depicting villagers drinking this. So it's very, very important to the culture of the people of Mexico. So Next one. The margarita. So today, we are also making the Paloma here in the cafe, which is actually more commonly drank in Mexico. But the margarita is kind of this wonderful meld of American Tex-Mex culture. Margarita means daisy in Spanish. So it's really fitting because this is all part of the daisy family of cocktails. A daisy cocktail has to use 4 things: a spirit, citrus, sugar, and then a liqueur of some kind. So that's your basic recipe for a margarita anyway. The daisies were really popular during the Prohibition, and tequila made its debut during the Prohibition. Some of the soldiers in the Spanish-American War drank tequila, and they were introduced to it there, but it really became popular during the Prohibition because Americans were trying to figure out how to drink, right? You couldn't do it legally here, so they had to go over and get something in Mexico. And so the origin of the margarita is really highly debated, but we know it came into publication in 1938. We know that people started making them in the 1940s, and it truly is a perfect meld of Mexican and American culture. So that's where the margarita comes from, and we'll be making one that really celebrates agave. Instead of using sugar, we are going to sweeten it with agave. So pretty simple. I went ahead and just juiced some lime juice. We're going to use 1 ounce of that. And I like to start with the agave on my side of the jigger, 1/2 ounce, because it's a little heavier. And then you can kind of clean it out with triple sec. You don't have to get fancy with this. This is a pretty cheap brand, and I really love it because it's really good quality for affordable price. So we use 1/2 ounce of that. And last but not least, 2 ounces of tequila. I really like Altos. It's a good, affordable brand. We use it in the bar all the time. And it's the one I use at the house as well. It's nice and peppery, goes really great with lime. I'm wondering, Sharon, should I take this off or should I shake with it? All right, I'm gonna shake with this on, so sorry if it's loud.
We want to hear that ice shaking.
That's a nice shake until you get your hands cold, and then it can go right into your glass. I'm not really a salt person. You can put it on the rim. You can also just put a pinch in. If I do want to use salt, I do like to just put a pinch in because it really accentuates all those awesome ingredients that you just used. Double straining it just to get any extra like lime pulp out of there. You can garnish it any way you like. At the Montford Rooftop Bar, we like to use limes that we've dehydrated so we can minimize waste. And that's all we do. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much. I wish that I
Thank
could
you.
grab that from you right now. Margaritas are
Come
just
up and
my
get one.
absolute favorite, and I'm hoping to join you upstairs after the program for a taste. I hope that everyone at home picked up their ingredients in order to make your own margarita at home. And in the meantime, we've posted Miranda's recipe in the chat box. So we're going to keep an eye on on Miranda mixing up the margaritas in the cafe throughout the program. Okay, now that we've got our cocktails, we'll get to know our guest artist, Byron Tenesaca. Byron created 3 coloring sheets for this evening's program, which I emailed to y'all yesterday, and they're also available for download on the museum's website. In the cafe, we've got them, and coloring color pencils up in the cafe. So I hope that you printed them out, got your color pencils and crayons ready so that you can start coloring. I'll turn it over to my colleague Kelly Baisley, the museum's School and Family Programs Manager. Welcome to you both, and thank you for being here this evening.
Thanks, Christy. Byron, we're so excited to have you with us tonight for this month's third Thursday. After working with you on a family day in conjunction with Appalachia Now, the museum's inaugural exhibition in our newly renovated building in fall of 2019, we knew we had to collaborate with you in as many programs as possible. So to give the audience a little background info, Byron is a visual artist and bilingual art educator who graduated from Western Carolina University in 2015. Byron served as a photography artist in resident at the Bascom Center for Visual Arts in 2016 and 2017. And his work has been exhibited regionally here at the Asheville Art Museum, the Bascom in Highlands, North Carolina, the Aramont School of Arts and Crafts in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, Western Carolina University's Fine Art Museum in Cullowhee, North Carolina, Specto Art Space in Bridgewater, Virginia, and Through This Lens Gallery in Raleigh, North Carolina. Tonight, Byron is our featured artist, and he'll be presenting on his photographic work as well as select paintings that relate to layering memories, culture, and history from the Andean and Appalachian mountain regions together, as well as the Andean cosmovision. Byron, welcome to the program. We're so excited to hear about your work.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for the introduction. I do want to say, before I get started, I want to thank the museum, and I also want to thank everybody that's part of this system of providing opportunities for artists like myself, regional art centers and museums like the Bascom, the Asheville Art Museum. Let's see. Also, recently I've been collaborating with Tryon School Arts and Crafts. And so I'm all super thankful for all these places who are able to provide us artists with platforms so we can reach a bigger audience. And so we're thankful for that. So. All right, so do I go ahead and start? Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to begin with sharing my screen. And let me know if you can see my screen, Kelly.
Yes.
Okay, and I will start my presentation. So a little background, and before I get my my presentation going, I wanted to start with this quote that I read in a book that I purchased in Ecuador on my last trip. It doesn't go word by word, but I made it to change it in the so that I can talk about myself. So it says, "I nurture it, and it nurtures me. I become the mountain, and the mountain becomes me." So with that being said, in the Andes of Ecuador, we have this philosophy in that, especially the rural areas of Ecuador. In Ecuador, we practice what it's called like a type of syncretism, where we practice various two philosophies or religion. The biggest one being Catholicism, also our Andean heritage, where we relate a lot of the things to the mountain, and we tend to treat other things as an equal being and in the system. So we see the mountain as the mother who, a part of the mother Earth, who nourishes us, feeds us, we cultivate the land. So then we're eating the mountain, so then it becomes us. But then at some point in our lives, we become part of the mountain as we, as humans, age and decay, becoming part of this system. So with that being said, I want to introduce a little bit about myself through my photographs, some of my documentary work, and also some of my art, my painting and drawing that I've done as well throughout these years. So I grew up in Ecuador at a very I grew up with my grandma and my aunts from the age of, I was about a year and 2 months when my mother decided to migrate here to the US. And I was left with my grandma and my aunts. And growing up in the Andes Mountains beside this river in this gorge, it was just so beautiful to me. I come from a long line of basket weavers. So constantly it was me playing around while my aunt and my grandma weave baskets. They do that for a living, as always, they do that for a living while also cultivating the land. And also grew up with my two aunts with a disability. One has a mental disability, another one has a disability with the bone disease. So also a lot of different things of like taking care of other people. And you're going to see that more in my work. The reason I mentioned that is because that comes back in my work as I try to reflect on why am I creating the content that I create at the age of 23 later on, sort of like reflecting, where am I seeing these images in my life? Where have I seen them now that my second part of my life, I live here now in the mountains of North Carolina. And this person on the right is my grandma. She's my mother. And I grew up my childhood with her and my aunts here who are also basket weavers in Ecuador till this day. And so I wanted to relate my work to Andean Cosmovision, which it's very difficult to explain because everybody has a different understanding of it. And you have to experience it yourself for it to kind of understand it fully. So by no means am I trying to put a definition of what it means. It's Andean Cosmovision is a way of experiencing things and a way of connecting with Earth. That's how I would try to explain it. So some of the words that I decided to put here is Andean Cosmovision places nature at the center of life and the need to maintain balance and harmony in one's interaction with her. The Pachamama, or Mother Earth, can be seen as a web with mounds or nodes. A vision of caring for nature, of living in community, or IU, with all living things throughout principles of reciprocity. Okay, and in our villages, in our communities in the Andes, we do a lot of things in terms of reciprocity. We help the community out, or that is the goal at least, especially with nature. And we try to pay attention to nature and how that works as well, how some plants help other plants out, and just the beauty of multiplication. Like, for example, when we grow potatoes, we have to take care of the plant. We have to nurture it, right? We have to water it. If it needs to be watered, we need to go and take care of it. And then eventually it gives back, right? We put in the time, we put in the care, and then it multiplies. And to me, growing up in Ecuador, it was beautiful as a kid growing up and seeing all these, planting potatoes. And then after a couple of months, it multiplied. It was similar to like an action of like finding these Eastern eggs, kind of like that. You just dig and find all these kinds of vegetables. Same with other plants, right? Like corn and squash. So squash, here it's called sambo. And this is a type of squash, a name given to this type of squash that grows everywhere in the region that I grew up with. So this idea of seeing these round items, right? Organic shapes in my early childhood kind of affected me as I become an artist and the content that I create. So I want you to remember about these organic shapes that I was surrounded with at the early age, because it comes important when I try to reflect based on later on as an artist and as how I mature as a person. And then just to give you an idea, the Andes Mountains where I grew up is around right here in the southern part of Ecuador. And the elevation in comparison to here in Asheville, I believe it's around 3,000 feet above sea level. And where I grew up, it's around 8,000. So it's very high up. Another symbol that you see in Andean cosmovision, way of organizing things, is through this chacana, what they call it over there. And it's the equivalent of a bridge. A lot of people tend to label it as a like Indian cross or like some type of cross, but the chacana itself is a bridge. It was a symbol that predates back to before colonialism. And you organize different things, how you can get from one point to the other, like a bridge, kind of like steps, like a bridge from like, you organize it in terms of 4 things, like the 4 elements, right? Earth, water, fire, air, and also like north, south, west. Seasons like spring, summer, fall, winter, and other things also in the way of living in a lot of these mountain areas, the Andes Mountains of Ecuador. In other symbols as well, like for example, the condor, the puma, and the snake, they represent certain things. The condor represents like the world of like, I guess the equivalent here in the US would be like the heaven, and then the puma represents the people, the world of the mortals, and then the snake, the underworld, right? We also have Aini, Minka, and Mita, which are also ways of going through our life and living among others with, again, reciprocity and giving something up for the better good of the whole community, whether it be like giving your time to build a bridge or putting in time for something that is going to be good for everybody in the community. And then Hanapacha, Kaipacha, and Ukupacha, they also mean like I said, the equivalent of like the heaven, the world of the mortals, of the humans, and then the underworld. So this I just wanted to include that because, let me see. You can see some of this in my art as we go. So here again, going back to some of my work details around how areas where I grew up, like the cornfields and digging up things for interacting with nature. So a lot of my documentary work tends to do how humans are kind of like interacting with nature and looking at it in an abstract aspect. So here's another image of my work. These are just an image of my cousin getting grass to feed the guinea pigs. And then here is my aunt and my cousin who are harvesting some onions. And all these big ones, these big leaves over here are from the squash, the type of squash that grows everywhere in Ecuador. So we do a lot of agriculture as well in Ecuador. And then here is a painting. Before I started in photography, which I'm focused on right now, I also painted, and I'm still painting, creating works here and there. And so here is one example where I have included symbols from the Indian cosmovision of the condor at the very top, along with different type items like the snake and the puma, who represent different things. And then in my paintings, I tend to focus, I'm drawn to like how the human in terms of like dissolving or becoming sort of like a big, something bigger or merging to become something like deconstructing into a very organic form through in my works as well, in my paintings. And then here is one of my early works that I created while I was finishing my school at Western. And like I mentioned before, in Ecuador, we do, we practice. So in Ecuador, you can go to anybody and they're most likely going to say, I'm a Catholic, but that has a different meaning in Ecuador for a lot of people, not everyone, because you tend to focus, like, again, on the mountain. For example, here is an image of my grandma, and she has a image of the Virgin Mary that she was given as a present in work, and she loves that. But at the same time, we also tend to practice, for example, if I am feeling ill, and it doesn't have to do with the material aspect. It's more like a spiritual aspect. Could be like the equivalent of like feeling depressed. Well, one way we can treat that in Ecuador is by getting a lot of different herbs, a lot of different plants from different levels of the mountain. Okay, you need plants from different levels of the mountain. So plants that grow at a low level, that have evolved to grow at a low level, and then at a higher level, like the mid of the mountains, and then at the very high of the mountains. And so that's one way I wanted to portray this as a mountain, and also here the image of my grandma, along with a double exposure, you can say, and even the portrait of myself. So a lot of things merging together. And this is just me. When I go to Ecuador, there's a ritual where I have to kind of let go of energy that I'm bringing, and there's a specific type of people who are able to kind of work with you in terms of do like a cleansing with plants and different like that. Okay, so moving on to the Bascom, where I was received my artist residency in 2016, and I started playing around with this concept of the organic form, and also I began experimenting with photography. I was into photography, but I began experimenting more in terms of layering. So this is one collaboration that I did with an artist. This is influenced by a photographer, Gregory Crutzen. This is where we took eggs and multiply them, and also the people. I was working and experimenting with layers at the time. And then I remember from my class where in Western, where I was introduced to Robert Mapplethorpe in the images. And when I viewed this work, this reminded me of my aunt, who had a rare bone disease. I remember my grandma would bathe her and would have to take care of her because she couldn't obviously do some things. So I was like, where have I seen this image? When I looked at it, it reminded me of something whenever, as a child, playing around and seeing my grandma bathe my aunt and take care of her as well, like that. So that reminded me of my childhood. And then I began playing with this image of this organic form. And I remember the place where I was living, there was this squash, and I was like, look at this squash. It reminds me so much of home. And then I started playing with that and with light and multiplying. And eventually I took it outside and I started exploring myself more as an individual, because I've always been, as a photographer, behind the camera, and I wanted to do kind of like this performance where I would be in front of the camera and experimenting. And I started noticing things that about myself, especially the human body. And I began to do a study of it. And that eventually led me to going back to this organic round form, and the thought of being one with nature, as like realizing, understanding that we're here only for a period of time, and that we, whatever we take, we should also give back something, right? And understanding this concept of being just another equal to another plant, to another animal, or maybe to a fruit or a vegetable who will eventually decay and then decompose as well. So I wanted to do that throughout a lot of places here in the mountains, in mountains of North Carolina. And I took it to a lot of places after big storms so that I could get this extra effect on some of these images. I multiply it as well. And this image is kind of mimicking what's in the background, the middle ground and the foreground, very organic. I include elements of water and the waterfalls as well. So I took the human mount everywhere in the places that I would visit. And then I also remember when I was in Ecuador growing up, I used to collect nests of birds, and I knew that I wanted to put this mount in the nest. So I ended up a whole day creating a nest in this forest. And I also introduce a photograph, and then I multiply it as well. And so then this project transformed in an ongoing project. So wherever I tend to move to for whatever reason, I try to recreate a certain aspect of this idea of the human, of the person being represented as a very organic form, equal to the rest of the organisms in this earth. And so that has led me to do some documentary work and pay attention to a lot of things in fruits and vegetables and things like that, and how I can rearrange any organism that I come in contact with. So these are some of my studies that I have done recently. And some of the works that I have created for you today kind of have to deal with some of these arrangements of my most recent work. And so here is what I have created for you. And I believe that is all. I don't want to, I feel like I've talked forever, so I'm going to stop right there and get back to Kelly.
Thank you, Byron. That was wonderful. That was a lot of information and visuals to digest and a quick presentation, but thank you. I have a few questions for you and for everyone at home. Please add your questions to the chat box and we will be happy to ask them towards the end of the program. So I wanted to start by asking you, Byron, as a photographer, an illustrator, a painter, I'm curious when you started to work in each of those medium and how you choose which medium you'll use for each new project.
Yes, I do focus on a lot of two-dimensional medium. I've been trying to pick up here, going back to basketry, and it just kind of like, it has to do with what I'm doing at the time, honestly. For example, I did painting when I was have access to a studio and have access to materials and things like that. But then I moved on to, I was given the opportunity to do photography and focus on that. So whatever the world kind of like puts in front of me, I'm able to work on that. For example, recently I didn't have a studio, but I had my computer. So I started focusing more on arranging things and seeing things, what I find. So it's kind of like what I'm doing at the time in my personal life, like whether it be work, and then I take it into the medium kind of relates to what I'm doing in terms of my job. But I know that I love creating and putting things together and how I see them. And for example, these three works, thank you for you, Kelly, for pushing me. Again, these works are, I love it. I just love what I came up with. But if it wasn't for the opportunity that you pushing me, I wouldn't have created any of this. So I'm like, at the end, I was so happy with what I had come up with. So thank you.
So are we. Thank you. So speaking of jobs, as a visual artist and an educator, how do you balance those roles so that you have enough creative energy to put into both of those?
Coming from the background, it's been very difficult because as an artist, obviously you need funding. Thankfully, I had a lot of people, including like the Asheville Art Museum, who supports artists like me so we can keep creating. But it's just that we want to have a lot of energy and two, education for me is important. And I realized that at the end of my residency, when I started reflecting more of my upbringing, my grandmom, which is my mom, my second mom, she grew up in this type of like slavery system until the age of 18, and then her parents didn't allow her to go and get her education. She was the most smart out of her community, and just because she was a woman, she wasn't able to keep studying. And so education to me is important. And so I want to be involved in education, whether it be something small. For example, right now I'm teaching adults, like a high set class, like teaching science, social studies, reading and writing, and math. And I mean, I'm tired at the end, but I just love doing that. It's super important for me, but also find time to create myself and be involved on other things. So yeah, I think I have a lot of energy as a person.
You
Yeah.
must. I know teaching can be draining.
Yeah.
So you've talked a lot about your mother. I know she's been very inspirational and influential in your life. And I'm wondering if it was her or maybe somebody else who was the person in your life that encouraged you to be an artist.
Well, originally my biological mother, when I moved here, um, immigration as a young individual can be very tough. Um, can be very tough, and I didn't know I had these negative kind of feelings, or this negative energy in me, until I started doing a lot of work, and I started reflecting on immigrating here, and eventually living with a person who is your mother, but you've never been with your mother, you've been with your grandma, and so that has affected me as well. But then um, I feel like reflecting. I think I reached a point in my life where I wanted to be sure who I was moving forward. Maybe around the age of like 24, 25, 23, 24. Around there, I knew that I wanted to know who I am and be at peace with myself. And so I remember that since since I had memory, I would collect like drawings. I would sketch things. I would collect, for example, every time we would go sell baskets in the city, I would collect anything that had a design, and I would come back home and then be on the mirror, on the glass, and tracing that. And I had this huge collection of things. So it made sense that at the point where I am right now in my life, that maybe I was just doing art my whole life.
It sounds like it. And then one last question for now, Byron. For your Human Mounds series, you're in those pictures, and I'm wondering, do you consider those self-portraits, or are you just a model? And then technically speaking, how are you setting those pictures up to take of yourself? Is it a self-timer or a remote shutter or something else? Somebody else pressing the shutter?
No, so it's for me personally, it's a performance. It's a performance. It's almost like therapy. Being out in nature at a point in my life where I had a lot of things going. And just personally, I felt very conflicted, where my upbringing and my actions were not matching that, and especially with other people, and how I was treating myself evenly. And so I see it as a performance, and just as it just makes me, it kind of takes away my thinking about other things. I'm able to enjoy just feeling nature with my feet as a model, just expressing, just trying to connecting with nature and touching and feeling the dirt. And as a photographer, I'm focusing, maybe doing studies of light and how that changes. So there's different aspects, but in terms of the technicality, I started just by doing timers. So then I would have a lot of images of me like going back to the camera and doing all these faces. But then later on, I got a remote control, kind of like similar to Cindy Sherman, as she has a body of work where you can actually see her holding the cable to her camera.
Right.
Mine wasn't a cable, but remote control. And just looking at nature and trying to find inspiration, to find a right spot or right angle that goes along with a mountain, a hill, or anything like that. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Byron. Thanks so much for sharing about your work. For those of you at home, if you'd like to learn more about Byron's portfolio of work or his commissioned photography, I'm going to drop his website into the chat box right now.
Okay. Kelly and Byron, thank you so much. I really do love the coloring sheets that you made for us, Byron, and the way that they're both different from but complement your larger body of work. And it's so clear to me now that sort of your sources of inspiration. I was telling Kelly, I think I'm going to have to start collecting some Byron Tenesaca. They're so beautiful. So thank you. It's just really wonderful to see that broader spectrum of your artistic practice, your community work, and your work as an art educator, fellow art educator. So we're really glad that you could be here with us tonight, Byron. Now I'd like to welcome Natalia Maxie. Natalia is joining us this evening from Ecuador. Byron suggested Natalia as our musical guest to complement his art, and he will be assisting in the introduction and interview this evening with Natalia. Natalia, it's great to see you. Can you talk a little bit more about the music that we'll be listening to this evening?
Natalia, ¿puedes decir algo acerca de la música que vamos a escuchar esta tarde?
Sí, ¿me escuchan primero?
Sí.
Perfecto. Ya. Yo formo parte de una agrupación que se llama Alli Yuyaywan, que básicamente...
I form part of a group named Yuyaywan.
Y esta agrupación tiene canciones o hemos creado canciones que hablan acerca de música andina, experimental y minimalista.
And we have make work that we explore minimalist sound making and music.
Entonces esta noche les presento unas 2 canciones que hemos creado junto con la banda y aparte de unos covers que me gusta mucho escuchar, entonces quería compartirle con ustedes.
So then I will share with you this afternoon 2 songs from our music group, and also when transition, there's going to be some covers, some sounds that I love very much.
Entonces espero que lo disfruten.
So then I hope you enjoy it.
All right, I'm excited. Thank you, Byron, for your help. And Natalia, it's great to have you here. I'm going to share the musical selections that were recorded just for this evening's program. The music will last about 20 minutes. And just a heads up, you may need to adjust your volume for optimal enjoyment of Natalia's experimental music while you work on your coloring pages. And again, I hope that everyone will turn on your cameras and share your coloring pages in progress at the end of the program. Maybe folks in Perspective Cafe, maybe we can turn the camera away from Miranda for a few minutes and people can hold up their coloring pages there too. All right, let me get my screen share. Okay, can you see my screen? Here we go.
noche solamente la luna me guía. Voy caminando en la noche, solamente la luna me guía. A cada paso que adentro en el bosque voy convirtiéndome en mi sombra. A cada paso que adentro en el bosque voy convirtiéndome en mi sombra. Busco en la tierra el origen y en el agua la memoria. Busco en la tierra el origen y en el agua la memoria. Busco en el aire la inspiración y en el fuego mi corazón. Busco en el aire la inspiración y en el fuego mi corazón. Voy caminando en la noche, solamente la luna me guía. Voy caminando en la noche, solamente la luna me guía. A cada paso que adentro en el bosque voy convirtiéndome en mi sombra. A cada paso que adentro en el bosque voy convirtiéndome en mi sombra. Busco en la tierra el origen y en el agua la memoria. Busco en la tierra el origen y en el agua la memoria. Busco en el aire la inspiración y en el fuego mi corazón. Busco en el aire la inspiración y en el fuego mi corazón. Levanto una palabra dulce para ti, canto de colores este tiempo junto a ti. Levanto una palabra dulce para ti, canto de colores este tiempo junto a ti. Agarra tu mochila y vámonos de viaje, sintiendo tu energía, el eterno paisaje. Agarra tu mochila y vámonos de viaje, sintiendo tu energía, el eterno paisaje. Te veo en la montaña y en el mar, te recuerdo con cariño y con libertad. Te veo en la montaña y en el mar, te recuerdo con cariño y con libertad. Vibración andina, roja la canción, tu sonrisa va coloreando el corazón. Vibración andina, roja la canción, tu sonrisa va coloreando el corazón. latidos, abuelo que nos acompaña. Abuela, enciende el alma, agua que corriendo va a toda velocidad, flotando hacia el sopla. Medicina, alivia, medicina, vibra el corazón con esta canción. Sopla medicina, alivia medicina, vibra el corazón con esta canción. Medicina que fluye con serenidad por el torrente sanguíneo hacia la libertad. También es viento tu alma cordillera, una ventisca que refresca en la selva. Y ha sido un gusto compartir contigo, que te vaya bien en todo tu camino. Ha sido un gusto compartir contigo, que te vaya bien en todo tu camino. Bienvenido a la montaña, dicen los sapos del sendero. Instinto de chasqui viajero, tu bosque y el silencio están tus compañeros, compañeras de la selva. Una bendición en todo lo que hagas, que haya mucho amor por donde tú vayas. Una bendición en todo lo que hagas, que haya mucho amor por donde tú vayas. Runa, runa, he, vibra shunguito, ama shunguito. Runa, runa, he, vibra shunguito, ama shunguito. Entiendo que no puedo suplicarle una vez más, pero nada se detiene, solo vivo para ti. Dame solo un beso que me alcance hasta morir, como un vicio que me duele. Quiero mirarte a los ojos. Cuando te me alejas se acelera mi motor, me da fiebre, me hago fuego y me vuelvo a consumir. Dame solo un beso que me alcance hasta morir, como un vicio que me duele. Quiero mirarte a los ojos. Luna, no me abandones más, que tiendo a recuperarme en la cuna de tus cráteres. Silencio, se abre la tierra y se alzan los mares al compás del volcán. Y cuando te me acercas se acelera mi motor. Me da fiebre, me hago fuego y me vuelvo a consumir. Dame solo un beso que me alcance hasta morir, como un vicio que me duele. Quiero mirarte a los ojos. Luna, no me abandones más, que tiendo a recuperarme en la cuna de tus cráteres. Silencio, se abre la tierra y se alzan los mares al compás del volcán. Ojos azules, no llores, no llores ni te enamores. Ojos azules, no llores, no llores ni te enamores. Llorarás cuando me vaya, cuando remedio ya no haya. Llorarás cuando me vaya, cuando remedio ya no haya. Tú me juraste quererme, quererme toda la vida. Tú me juraste quererme, quererme toda la vida. No han pasado 2, 3 días, tú te alejas y me dejas. No han pasado 2, 3 días, tú te alejas y me dejas. En una copa de vino quisiera tomar San Pedro. En una copa de vino quisiera tomar San Pedro. San Pedro para curarme, San Pedro para sanarme. San Pedro para curarme, San Pedro para sanarme. La ra 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 ra. Ojos azules, no llores, no llores ni te enamores. Ojos azules, no llores, no llores ni te enamores. Llorarás cuando me vaya, cuando remedio ya no haya. Llorarás cuando me vaya, cuando remedio ya no haya. kikiyawa waikikiya, San Marikuna kanika, Mikchirikuna kanika. Puyuya wawa puyuya, kikiyawa waikikiya, San Marikuna kanika, Mikchirikuna kanika. Haya shamungami wawa, kuku shamungami wawa, wakakukta uyashpaka, hakunyuka wanmikami. Haya shamungami wawa, kuku shamungami wawa, wakakukta uyashpaka, hakunyuka wanmikami. Puyuya wawa puyuya, kikiyawa waikikiya, San Marikuna kanika, Mikchirikuna kanika. Puyuya wawa puyuya, kikiyawa waikikiya, San Marikuna kanika, Mikchirikuna kanika. Haya shamungami wawa, kuku shamungami wawa, wakakukta uyashpaka, hakunyuka wanmikami. Haya shamungami wawa, kuku shamungami wawa, wakakukta uyashpaka, hakunyuka wanmikami.
Okay, I hope that you all enjoyed relaxing while coloring and listening to Natalia Maxie of Yuyaywan as much as we did. We have a few questions come in throughout the program, but if anyone has any other questions they'd like to ask to our guest artist Byron Tenesaca, musician Natalia Maxie, or the museum staff, please continue to put those in the chat box and we can invite all of this evening's guests back on. I have a question for Natalia, actually. And maybe Byron, if she has stepped away, you could answer this question for us. But the question came in, the last song didn't sound like Spanish. What language was that in?
So can you hear me? Okay. So
Yes.
the last language came in the last part of the song, the performance was not in Spanish, was in Quechua, which is the language spoken in the southern part of the Andes Mountains of Ecuador. Now it's within the family of Quechua, which is has to do with whole the language itself, but there's different dialects in Quechua. It's one of them, and it's spoken in the southern part of Ecuador. And yeah, it was in that language, or indigenous mother language.
Great, thank you. This is a question for Byron. Byron, you mentioned that you came from a long line of basket weavers. Did they teach you to weave? And if so, do you incorporate that into your artistic practice?
Yes. So currently, since my my grandma has memory, her parents and grandparents also weaved, and so I grew up around them and playing with little parts of sticks and things like that from the mountain cane that grows in the Andes Mountains. And although I know the basics, I am not as knowledgeable in terms of preparing the material and everything like that. But I have done programs with in public school where I have taught students how to do basic weaving and different types of weaving with paper. And so it's something that it's emergent and appearing in my new works, where I start to focus more on my weaving. And I'm actually, I would say weaving has it's almost like I've come full circle, right? I've come full circle from, you know, being brought to North Carolina and learning more about myself as a person, how art is part of me, all the way to now where I'm actually experimenting with weaving. And not only in my photography, there is a beautiful artist here in North Carolina, or Cherokee artist, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, who does photography and involves weaving. And the museum has a piece in the collection. I cannot remember the name off the top of my head, but I love that. It's one of my favorite pieces in the museum's collection. And so, yeah, I definitely, I'm experimenting. It's almost like I feel like my whole life's come full circle where I'm now experimenting with weaving. It's something that's always been part of my life. But originally it's more for like I said, my family, they did it for so many years for the usage of the basket. When they harvested a lot of things, people needed things to put the vegetables and fruits in. So my family weaved not small baskets, but like huge, big baskets as containers. And then plastic came and kind of affected a lot of the community in where I lived. But my aunts probably right now are weaving baskets. That's all they do. There's this situation where one of my aunts went to get her new ID in Ecuador, and they told her to put her fingerprints. And the guy who was getting her fingerprints said, "Ma'am, you don't have a fingerprint anymore." And she was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Yeah, you don't have a fingerprint." She lost her fingerprints because she had weaved so many years that the material kind of just builds a callus on your hand, and it's now like there's no fingerprint from weaving her whole life. So, yes.
Wow. Byron, how often are you traveling back to Ecuador? And when you're there, are you making work each time?
I travel to Ecuador. I try to travel every year. I have a lot of family. My dad, I have sisters there. I have aunts. I have a lot of family, and it's super important for me to go back and and this goes for everybody. There's nothing like the place where you grew up as a young child. You have those memories, those smells, those sounds of like the river flowing, the smells of like the plants and certain plants, and also those streets. You have memories of that, and when you see that, it just reminds you of like this comfort place when you were young and you didn't have to worry about taxes and all this kind of other stuff, material things. So I try to go every year, and when I do go, I try to pick at the brain of my aunts and other people who live there and see where their state of thinking and how they're building their baskets, if anything has affected them in terms of the work that they do there, whether it be the material or something or anything. It can affect the way of living. So my main goal is for their children to further their education so that things like migrating up north doesn't need to be an option anymore. Doesn't need to be, because with migrating comes a lot of things that like trauma as a child with migrating and experiencing a new culture. So yeah.
One last question for you, Byron. As an artist, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece as an artist, let's see. The one thing I'm thinking right now is shout out to Billy Love at the Bastion in Highlands, North Carolina. He would have this saying that you kind of put a lot of effort and a lot of work, and he would say, because I love fishing. I grew up fishing in the river in the Andes Mountains. He said, you bait your hook, you cast the line, and then you wait. And so, like, as long as you have done something, like now it's like the waiting period. Like you put all the effort, you put all you know all the planning, and now you just wait. So in anything, whether that be, you know, a job application or anything, just like put yourself out there, you know, in a good manner, in an honest manner, and then you just wait to see what happens.
That's great advice. Thank you, Byron. At this time, I hope everyone will join me in turning on your cameras and holding up the coloring work in progress that you've been working on. And Kelly is going to take a screenshot for us. So here's mine. Oh, Taylor, that's awesome. You took a totally different tack than I did. And Kelly, you didn't get very far, but I think Taylor's been working the whole time. Thank you so much. Okay, it's about time to wrap up. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. A special thank you to guest artist Byron Tenesaca, bartender Miranda Escalante, musician Natalia Maxie, Art Bridges for its generous sponsorship of tonight's program. Sorry, and all of our Third Thursday programs, and our friends at Perspective Cafe for their contributions to this virtual event. Our event page will remain live, so if anyone wants to go back and find the links, download Byron's coloring pages, or rewatch tonight's program, I certainly will, to listen to the music. It was so beautiful. That event page will remain live if you want to go back and find those links. Everything will be posted by the end of the day tomorrow. We'll be sending out an evaluation to collect your feedback on this evening's program, so please watch your email. The museum is currently open to visitors. We're operating at reduced capacity and have a number of COVID-19 safety measures in place. You can learn more about those safety measures, as well as our current and upcoming exhibitions, virtual programs, and small group in-person offerings at ashevilleart.org. And if you enjoyed tonight's program, please consider making a donation to our annual fund or becoming a museum member. Thank you again for all of your support. Stay well and have a great rest of your evening.